Okay, wonderful. So hello and welcome to Solar Alberta's 2024 Solar Show, our 10th annual. This session is called Small Scale Generation Regulation 101. Please note that we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My name is Heather McKenzie and I'm the Executive Director at Solar Alberta. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm hosting you today from Amiskwaciwaskahegan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Métis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Papaches, Nehewak or Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux. Nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. We were delighted to have so many people register for this week and for this event in particular. To start, we'd like to thank Enbridge for sponsoring the 2024 Solar Show as a whole, and Solus Energy for sponsoring this exciting session today. We are happy and grateful to have them as sponsors. Today we'll be hearing from Nicole Spears. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer period in which you can all participate. Nicole's colleague, Betsy, will be joining the two of us on the virtual stage for the Q&A. Some of you will remember Betsy from the Solar Show 2 years ago, as she was one of the presenters for the Microgeneration Regulation 101 seminar that is still available on our YouTube channel. We'll be using Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat box, so please enter your questions in the Q&A section. Also, please click on the little thumbs up symbol to upvote questions that you like. The entire session will wrap up in an hour. We'll be recording it to make sure this session is available on our YouTube channel following the show. Just want to encourage you all to check out our online trade show during the week. We have listed on this slide and in the chat all of the wonderful organizations who are participating. To view their exhibitor booths, which include a listing of key solar-related services, contact info, and video introductions, please click on the link in the chat. And before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. Please take a minute to answer the question popping up on your screen. While some are still doing the poll, I encourage you to take a minute, pop your name, land acknowledgement, any contact info you're comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event so that others can look you up on LinkedIn or email you, and hopefully you can stay connected. All right, so that's looking good. Just going to have a look at the results of the poll. Looks like we've got lots of solar curious folks here, but a good chunk of industry professionals as well. So a nice mix in the audience today. Welcome, everyone. It's great to get a sense of who we have here. And now, just to share a little bit about who we are, Solar Alberta is now in its 33rd year of operation. We're a nonprofit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. And we do so by advocating, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 783 individuals and 162 businesses. We have approximately 21,000 followers on social media and through our newsletter. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website. You can see a screenshot of the directory here on this slide and a link to it in the chat. In addition to our website services, we run a number of educational programs, as well as in-person and online networking events. Please note that recordings of all our previously recorded events can be found on our YouTube channel. This spring, we will once again be running a number of online courses in solar for solar industry professionals or those transitioning into the sector. So our courses are online Tuesday and Thursday evenings on 3 to 5 nights over 2 to 3 weeks. First up is Economics of Grid-Tied Solar PV. You can register for all of our courses at the link provided in the chat. We're also offering a new Buy 3, Get Codes Free bundle. This bundle includes the 4 technical courses. The link to purchase the bundle is also available in the chat. Recordings of these courses are available for sale alongside our paid workshops in the solar training videos section of our website. With respect to our advocacy work, we have a number of different campaigns running, which include letter templates that you can use to contact decision makers. Please send letters requesting the Canada Greener Homes grant be refinanced, requesting an end to the provincial moratorium on renewable power plants, and requesting a number of supports for solar and energy efficiency upgrades to homes and businesses in Alberta. We also have free Rise Up for Renewable lawn signs available for pickup in 11 municipalities around Alberta. Please click on the link in the chat to access all our templates and make a sign order today. And now that you know a little bit about us, we just want to take this opportunity to encourage you to join as a member. Membership is only $35 for individuals, and this week only, ending today, you can purchase an individual or student membership for a 20% discount. The link to become a member is also being placed in the chat. On April 24th, we'll be hosting our annual general meeting. Just want to invite you all to sign up as members, attend, and elect your new board. There are several vacancies to fill on the board this year. If you're interested in applying, you're welcome to do so through our website until February 29th. With your help, we are recognizing long-term dedicated contributors to solar in Alberta by gifting them a free lifetime Solar Alberta membership. Please consider becoming a member and nominating the solar champion in your life for this award. We're going to be accepting nominations until April 3rd, and the award recipients will be announced at our AGM. And we're very pleased to announce our very first Solar Alberta Diversity Scholarship. This scholarship is intended for equity-deserving individuals. Through the scholarship, we're seeking to promote inclusivity, amplify historically marginalized voices, and encourage diverse participation in the solar and solar-related sectors. We're going to award $2,000 to one equity-deserving individual registered in an Alberta training program that aligns with our mission. We'll be accepting applications until April 30th. Eligibility details and the scholarship application are available by clicking on the link in the chat, and we're super thankful to Enbridge for sponsoring this scholarship. And finally, we ask that you consider participating in our 50/50 raffle, which is now over $2,600. The 50/50 ticket sales will close at 4:45 today, and I'll be doing the draw live during our Solar and Friends mentoring and networking event. Additionally, please consider donating through the crowdfunding link in the chat. The Government of Alberta is matching all donations made through this link. And now I'm delighted to get this session underway by introducing our speaker for the day, Nicole Spears. Nicole is the Executive Director of Generation, Transmission and Markets in Alberta, Affordability and Utilities. This branch is responsible for the legislative, regulatory, and policy framework related to all forms of microgeneration, small and utility scale generation, including natural gas, renewables, and emerging technologies such as nuclear and energy storage, as well as transmission and electricity markets. Nicole brings over 20 years of provincial and federal government experience working in clean energy and climate change policy and environmental programs for most of her career. Prior to joining Alberta Energy in 2016 to work on electricity policy, Nicole was the Director of Climate Change Policy at Environment and Parks, leading a team dedicated to international advocacy, provincial climate strategy development, and sector-specific greenhouse gas reduction programs. Nicole holds a BA in anthropology, a diploma in journalism, and is currently studying for an MSc in energy policy and climate. Welcome, Nicole. We're so pleased you could join us today. I'm going to turn the screen share and the mic and camera over to you now.
Thank you so much, Heather and Solar Alberta, for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about small-scale generation. And I'm hoping we're good to go. So today we're going to talk about small-scale generation regulation. And as Heather mentioned, Betsy Lee Allward from the department will be here to answer any questions we have after the presentation. So we really want to jump into some key regulatory highlights, really talk about what small-scale generation is within the greater context of other generation opportunities in Alberta. and again, answer any questions that come through this. So this regulation is fairly new. It's only been in place for 5 years. It was enacted January 1, 2019. It really was set up to fill a gap in the system. This enables distribution connected generation from renewable and or alternative sources, supplying electricity into the grid or within an isolated community. So let's look at the regulation in further detail. The regulation establishes rules for small-scale generation and community generation, which is a subset of small-scale within the province of Alberta. The regulation provides a way for groups to set up their own systems to generate environmentally friendly electricity. It does this by providing definitions for both small-scale and community generation, as well as setting up the rules around setup and operation. The regulation outlines eligibility and establishes the balancing pool as a default market participant, which we will delve into further. In that role, the balancing pool, which is a third-party agency of the government, can help generators meet their participation requirements in the wholesale electricity market. The regulation also clarifies the interconnection cost allocation between community generators and consumers across the province. So generation in Alberta, which is driven by private investment, falls across the spectrum based on size and other factors. So if you're able to look at the diagram, on the left circle, this is microgeneration. Microgeneration is the production of electricity for self-consumption, for example, rooftop solar on a residential household. In Alberta, microgeneration is governed by a different regulation, the Microgeneration Regulation. And this does have a size limit. So this requires that the project must be less than 5 megawatts. So there is a strict size cap on microgeneration. Like small scale, microgeneration is connected to the distribution system and not connected directly to the larger transmission system. The size of a customer's microgeneration system is limited to generating the average amount of electricity the customer would use in a year. Now, if we can look way on the right-hand side at the right circle, utility scale generation refers to large projects, and these are intended to supply electricity to the grid for consumers across the province. In Alberta, utility scale generation has its own legislation as well. In this case, it's governed through the Electric Utilities Act, the Hydro and Electric Energy Act, and a number of regulations as well. Utility scale generation is also size specific in that it is greater than 5 megawatts, often connected in this case to the transmission system rather than the distribution system. So that left us with an area in between. And this is what we really want to focus on today. So small scale and community generation fall somewhere in the middle. There's no defined capacity limit in megawatts, but they must be connected and sized to fit that distribution system. So that is really the defining feature of the circle in the middle that we're going to focus on today. They must also produce electricity from renewable or alternative energy. Then if you look at the circle within the circle in the middle, this is not the movie Inception. This is solely focused on electricity. In this case, we're talking about community generation, and that's a subset of small scale generation. It will be distinguished through either a community benefits agreement or a community benefits statement, and we will talk further about ComGen, as we call community generation. So looking at small scale generation, in order to be an eligible small scale generator, the unit must utilize renewable or alternative energy, be directly connected to the distribution system, and sized within that system's limits. It will also act as a passive market participant. This means it will bid in at $0 per megawatt hour into the market and be a price taker. When that happens, they will receive the price of the hour in the power pool. All small-scale generators are passive market participants, meaning they are not actively bidding on the price of energy supplied to the power pool, but they will be compensated based on the hourly pool prices through the Alberta Electric System Operator, or the ISOP. Similar to the existing microgeneration process, the distribution owner is responsible for qualifying the eligibility of a small-scale generating unit. So the distribution owner will determine if it meets the size requirements of being connected to the distribution system. There's also a role for the Alberta Utilities Commission, which is our electricity regulator in the province, also called the AUC. The AUC is responsible for dispute resolution on that qualification of an eligible generating unit made by the distribution owner, and in determining whether a unit that is small scale is also a community generating unit, as there are additional benefits to being a community generating unit. Of course, a key element of looking at this is the costs. And the regulation stipulates that a small-scale power producer with a small-scale generating unit is responsible for all costs, including meters, metering, operations, and interconnection costs. Now turning to community generation, which again is a subset of small-scale generation. Our regulation includes a definition of community generation and generating unit, where community generating unit is a small-scale generating unit that provides specific benefits to a community group. These benefits are pretty broad. They can include economic, social, and/or environmental, and these are outlined in a community benefits agreement or community benefits statement. A community benefits agreement means a legally binding contract in writing between a small-scale power producer and a community group. On the other hand, a community benefits statement is made by a small-scale power producer that is itself a community group. Both of these documents must lay out the social, environmental, or economic benefits received by the community group through the generating unit. And again, small-scale generation can become community generation through application to the AUC. There is a long list in the regulation of eligible community groups. We provided some of those on the slide here today. So it's across a broad spectrum from irrigation districts, rural utilities, First Nations, municipalities, cooperatives, etc. But it is not limited to this list. While some specific groups are identified in the definition of community groups regulation, it allows for flexibility for a broad range of people to self-define as a community group through incorporation under the Societies Act or the Cooperatives Act. Any stakeholders not listed here or under those two acts can also participate in community generation if they partner with one of those listed groups. So there is a lot of opportunity to become community generation. Similar to a small-scale generating unit, the balancing pool can act as a default market participant for community generating units. The administrative cost of playing this role is socialized across all ratepayers. In addition, community generating units will be provided 1 meter per facility from the distribution provider. So that is an additional benefit for community generation that is not existing for small scale generation, that is not community generation. The cost of the meter is also socialized across all ratepayers. A community generating unit is responsible for all the other costs related to connection, metering activities, and operational costs. There is another small subset under community generation when it's in an isolated community. In this case, the distribution owner is also responsible for system reliability upgrades that may be required to supply electricity from the generator to the distribution system. So again, specific instances of isolated community generation. So let's talk about what the default market participant means, as this is one of the main benefits of identifying and moving towards the small scale generation regulation opportunity. So the regulation mandates that the balancing pool, again, this is a third-party agency, to act as the market participant on behalf of the small scale and community generation participants. This is optional. Generating unit can also choose to operate themselves as a market participant or hire a different third party to play this role for them. The balancing pool has similar responsibilities under the independent power and small power regulations, and they have the expertise and understanding of market participation obligations required by the Alberta Electric System Operator. What this does, it really helps reduce administrative barriers for generators, especially smaller generators that don't already have an established market participation role. It will help them meet the requirements for participating in the electricity market, which are laid out in the two acts, the Electric Utilities Act and the Hydroelectric Energy Act. The costs of this role by the balancing pool are socialized across all ratepayers, so they are not paid by the generating unit. So this is our last slide in terms of the small scale regulation. Small scale and community generators are regulated as passive market participants. And on that basis, again, they are deemed to have $0 per megawatt entry for electric energy supplied to the power pool, and they will take the price given in the hour. They will still receive the pool price of the hour, but they're not changing that through their own bid as they're coming in at zero. This, however, increases their consideration of being dispatched all the time as the market favors the lowest price bids. The balancing pool, if acting as the market participant, would exchange the electricity in the power pool. It would also be responsible for financial settlement with the electric system operator and final payment to the generator. And that is an overview of the small scale generation regulation. And Betsy and I are more than happy to answer any questions, and I'll turn it over to Heather.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Nicole. Appreciate that overview, and welcome to the virtual stage again, Betsy. Thanks for joining us. So just a reminder for folks to put their questions in the Q&A box. I'll just be monitoring that rather than the chat right now, so please utilize that function. Do see one question has already come in, so we can start with that, and I'm sure more will be joining them soon. So Joel says, in the States, some areas are abandoning one-to-one net billing for solar. What are the chances of this happening in the future in Calgary? And I guess you could expand to Alberta more broadly. Any comments on the net billing opportunities that we have? I think that's microgeneration related rather than small scale generation.
Yeah, I think so, Heather. So for the one-to-one net billing, that is currently the framework that's in place for microgeneration. So as Nicole explained earlier, microgeneration is producing power for your own use, such as rooftop solar on your own home. It's not, there is no net billing framework set out for small scale generation because essentially it is a form of commercial generation, a
Okay.
power plant, if you will.
Yeah, thank you for that. Darren, hi, welcome, Darren. Nice to see you in the audience today. Wondering, hasn't the balancing pool been closed down? How does the BP then act as a market participant on behalf of small scale generation or community generation?
Yeah,
Hi, Darren.
so
Sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
no worries. Um, the government has signaled that it intends to eventually remove some of the non-primary functions, non-core functions of the balancing pool. So these include a few initiatives that were in addition to the primary purpose, which was overseeing the power purchase arrangements when we moved to a competitive structure of electricity. Those ended in 2020, so that was the core function of the balancing pool. So we are actively working with the balancing pool in terms of what is the right role for the agency on a go forward basis. So it does still exist, and we're still very much working with them in terms of, do we want to move a few of the smaller, less core activities out to different agencies and or activities. So it's an active discussion. If small scale generation role did move out of the balancing pool, we would find a wonderful home for it.
Okay, you're not just going to leave them hanging. Appreciate that. Andrew is asking, is there any regulation about being off grid, or do I have to be tied to the grid? So yeah, we do. I will say, being Albertans, we get a lot of questions about off grid. I know that I think some 98% of solar installations are tied to the grid, but for the few off grid folks out there, are there any regulations they should be aware of, or any forced requirements for them to be on grid?
So I think if you talk about off-grid being truly not connected at all, then I think in the electricity space, our legislation primarily covers the grid and your relationship to the rest of Alberta and the electrical system. But I would still say, like, you should be aware of if there are other requirements you need to meet, like safety codes, building permits, zoning, things like that, but not the specific electricity legislation if you're truly off grid. If you mean off grid in a net zero sense, then yes, the legislation that we're talking about would still apply.
Mhm. And how about for microgrids? Like I know that there are, for example, I think it was Fort Chippewan operates a microgrid. Did they still have to conform to any of these legislations, or is that sort of separate since they're not on the broader electricity grid?
They do. So that Fort Chippewan is a good example of the isolated communities that Nicole was speaking about. So it is not tied to the broader electricity grid um, for sort of practical reasons due to its location and distance from the remainder of the grid and the costs that it would cost to connect that. But it still receives sort of a proxy of transmission service through local generation that's provided by the local distribution utility. So,
Okay.
like for example, this regulation, the small scale generation regulation, does apply to a community like Fort Chippewan.
Okay, interesting. Thanks. We had a great presentation about that about a year or two ago, and so it got me wondering. Cameron is saying, if the pool price goes negative, will small scale generators have to pay for their production? And if so, is there a mechanism that can be tied to real-time prices to turn off their production if it goes negative?
So in Alberta, we do have a price floor of $0. So under our current framework in Alberta, we do not have negative pricing that does appear in other jurisdictions.
Oh, that's very comforting. So you're not going to lose money. No, no
No,
going
if anything,
backwards.
you would maybe receive zero for the hour, but zero is the minimum in Alberta today.
Hmm. And I hope that's fairly rare. Okay, just to clarify, is the size of the project limited to the site's annual electricity consumption like the microgeneration regulation?
No. So not for small scale generation. Think of small scale generation as a power plant and a power plant only. So no, there are no size requirements in terms of because you're not there's no requirement to consume anything on site. The only size restriction is the capacity of your local distribution grid.
So it's just a smaller power plant. It's almost like small utility scale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I know we have started just talking about power plants ever since the moratorium on larger renewables. Everyone was so confused. So we just always say power plant, because we don't want them confusing it with solar on homes and businesses. So I'm having to do a lot of that language as well lately. So it's good to hear that that's the language I should use for small scale as well. Anna Maria is saying, do you think small scale generation is increasing in use in Alberta and Canada? What do you think are its biggest benefits for the climate and our communities?
So I think that the regulation was developed to fill a gap, that there was a call from industry that there was interest that was not just microgen, it wasn't just rooftop solar size to your load, and it wasn't large utility scale. So they were wondering how they fit in the middle. So a lot of work went into developing this regulation and the policy framework to try and meet the needs of those in the middle. So those looking for the opportunity. Because it defines a requirement to be renewable and or alternative, and it sets a greenhouse gas emission requirement under that, there is definite environmental benefits through it. The community opportunity does require the community economic, social, or environmental benefits. So we can see multiple benefits through that community development on top of the broader environmental benefits. So it's really looking to responding to demand coming out there through different developers that were interested. To date, I'm not going to say we have a ton of participants yet in the 5 years that it's been in place, but we are hoping through today and other opportunities, more and more people understand what are the different opportunities for generation in Alberta.
Well, thank you. And that's one of our goals too in hosting this today. So I'm glad we're on the same page. Hopefully all 100 people on this line will go and start a new small scale project. Here we go. Another question. We've got great questions today. I'm so glad you left lots of time for them. For organizations looking to build a small scale generation project, who will they need to contact? Is it the local wire service provider, the balancing pool, the ISO, the AUC? What's their first point of contact if they're going to go start filling out some applications?
All of the above.
Anyone first?
All of the above. So it's a form of commercial development. So, I mean, I think if you are a developer, you're probably somewhat familiar with the process in Alberta anyways. If you're more like a community group looking to do some work in this, then probably looking for a partner is an easier path to go. But definitely, it if your distribution connected, once you have plans for what your project is going to be, I would definitely contact your local distribution utility.
Mhm. Yeah, especially since this one is limited by their capacity, right?
Yeah.
I have heard of a couple community generation folks who have kind of done a lot of planning and this and that, and then later talked to the distribution network and discovered they didn't have the capacity for 2 megawatts in that region. So it would have been a great conversation to have first. Do you have the capacity for us? Can you take what we want to offer?
Yeah, exactly. So
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't mean that if the system doesn't have capacity, that you absolutely can't build anything, but then there comes a lot of system upgrade costs with it, which is of course a consideration.
Yeah, and much better to know right up front too.
Hmm.
Good point. I know we have a number of distributors who are members of Solar Alberta, and they're always chomping at the bit saying, "Hey, come talk to us about your small scale,"
Absolutely.
because they would like to get in at the early stage for sure and be kind of partners in that journey. So that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and
But
all of the large distributors, your Fortis, your Epcor, those ones, they all have pretty like fulsome information on the
mhm,
website that kind of walks you through the process and the steps.
great. Justin's asking, what does the average small scale generator look like? Is it about 100 kilowatts solar out in a field, a wind turbine on a property of a community association, or all of the above? You know, I've certainly heard of the Métis Crossing solar farm. I think that one was 1.6 or 2 megawatts, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe you could elaborate further on what the typical sizing would be.
Yeah, so we kind of see two groupings. So in terms of technology, we do see solar as the prevalent technology under this regulation right now. So not by regulation, but by choice of the developers. It's kind of modular. Can be low impact and reasonably accessible. So we see solar as the most possible choice, most popular choice right now as opposed to wind. And then in terms of sizing, it's really primarily financial considerations that drive the size. So I would say they're more in the community ones tend to be in the 1 to 3 megawatt range, just because a megawatt of solar is $1 to $2 million. And then the larger commercial ones in the small scale space tend to be in that, 15, 20-ish, probably up to like no more than 25 if you want to stay distribution connected. But if you're about 100 kilowatts, it's probably just more economic to do microgeneration because of a simpler approvals process.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think we're seeing that because two of our members, Bow Valley Cooperative and also Spice, they were looking at the small scale generation regulation to do some community generation, and they were both kind of working under the 100 kilowatt sort of system range, and so they ended up finding it easier to do within the micro generation regulation. So that's definitely bearing out in our own membership. So thank you for that. Can a system have modules that are both tied to the grid and then some isolated from the grid? And how does that affect the system maximum? So I assume that is a microgeneration question. Um, can you kind of mix and match your system?
I would say for a question like that, I would contact your local distribution utility. I think some of that comes down to more the technical and the safety requirements of how you would set that up. You might actually set it up as two systems that are physically located next to each other, but for the purposes of electricity are actually considered like two separate systems. But I would start with your local distribution utility.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Paul is asking, how does having energy storage on the small scale generator change the hosting capacity analysis done by the distribution folks, the DFO and the TFO? Considering it is dispatchable, the hosting capacity should logically not matter. Is that correct?
So I think again, the distribution utility will determine, what is the right size for your connection. And certainly, storage presents some opportunities if you wanted to pair that with your solar facility. That will be very specific to the development, and then they would work with the proponent to talk about how the storage unit will be utilized and how that would change the overall capacity and size of the unit.
You should
Yeah, it's very
also
interesting.
You should probably also keep in mind that the small scale generation regulation requires the unit to be a price taker, which means bidding at zero, which means you're almost always dispatched. So how does a storage unit play in to a configuration where it's dispatched all the time as opposed to actually not being dispatched and charging energy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be more of a utility scale operation, hey, where they have that power to kind
Or a
of.
distributed
Ju-
generation configuration?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so you can be the
Interesting.
same size, but you may not want to be a specific small scale generating unit and using the default market participant through the balancing pool. You may want to hire a third party or participate yourself as a market participant because energy storage will allow you opportunity for arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
So you can potentially make more money through that opportunity. But
Mm-hmm.
something to consider, and we're certainly just seeing more and more storage in Alberta. So some of these things haven't been figured out yet, I would say too. It's a pretty new area.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the how things are shifting with storage sort of coming into the picture more and more now. I know in August when I looked at the utility scale queue, 30% of the solar projects were being planned with storage as a component, which was quite exciting, but also made me curious to see, what that all looks like down the road and how it contributes to our grid reliability and whatnot.
Hmm.
Neil is asking, is it possible to migrate a micro generation system to a small scale generation system? And if so, what steps would be required to accomplish this? Oh, fascinating question, Neil. Yeah, can you upscale? I like it.
Uh, you can. It depends on your specific configuration. So, if it's a quite a large installation, the project will be required to undergo power plant approval, so Rule 007 approval under the Alberta Utilities Commission. Generally, anything like greater than 10 megawatts. If you're under that, there's either expedited sort of checklist approval processes, and if you're under one, there's exemptions. But if you're in that sort of medium size between 1 to 5, currently under microgeneration, moving to a small scale, you will no longer be exempt from that approval process. And also, like I said, depending on size, if you're joining the wholesale electricity market, there's a number of requirements you need to meet to be a market participant in the wholesale electricity market. So it kind of depends on the size and the specific configuration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, and I had a feeling we get a question like this today because we had a session on multifamily solar yesterday. So Jim's asking, can a group of homeowners, say every home on a close, join together to form a power generating company? They should be limited by their roof area and not their past consumption. So I guess that's not quite multifamily. He's asking more about like a neighborhood or friends on the same block. Any comments on that? If they can join together to create a company, and I suppose use their roofs for the installations, but not be limited based on consumption is the question.
Uh, yes. Um, it depends. I would say that's one of the sort of more flexible configurations that Nicole was speaking to in terms of the eligible community groups. So there was that slide that we had earlier about, certain eligible groups like Indigenous groups. But if you are let's say fam a number of families, 5 families could incorporate, as a cooperative or as under the Societies Act, and then under that configuration potentially qualify for community generation. And because if you are intending to build under this regulation, you're a power plant, so there are no size requirements, by legislation. I think it might come down to technical considerations and economics, though, of spreading out an installation over, let's say, 5 rooftops.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. An easier method might be for everybody to just buy electric vehicles and then they can max out their roof space under the micro generation. I just say that because we just got one and now I'll be able to max out my roof space because we're going to be consuming enough electricity now. But I suppose it depends how big your roof is too, right? Some people's roofs are probably considerably bigger than mine. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's a neat idea to kind of create a society with your neighbors. I actually happen to be doing that with my neighbors right now, so maybe we'll think about that. Dan, what is the fundamental reason behind needing to limit microgenerators based on their usage versus being able to maximize their total roof space to supply energy to the grid? It will be no surprise to you too. We get this question all the time. I would say this is almost a daily question at Solar Alberta, is general frustration with the cap on microgenerators and the desire to sort of have unlimited self-supply and unlimited export like the industrial operations have currently. Any comments on sort of the rationale behind that, or where that's coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So microgeneration, the policy intention for microgeneration is for self-supply. So that is why that size limitation kind of comes into play. When you are producing excess electricity under the current framework, um, a microgenerator would be receiving some bill credits, but that is actually that cost of providing you with those credits is actually socialized across all ratepayers, including vulnerable Albertans. There's also some like technical limits and considerations that are a part of it too. Microgeneration is exempt or eligible for um, a lot of expedited or exemptions from approvals because of the intention of not generally spilling energy onto the grid. And so that kind of comes into play as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that. And I mean, it's really important for us to understand the history of where these regulations came from. I know a recent AUC ruling was intriguing to me because it also stated a second reason for the microgeneration regulation was in fact to encourage folks to develop energy on site as well. So at times, it sometimes feels like there's sort of conflicting intentions, but I think we're doing a balancing act here. And I appreciate Nicole. I think last year you mentioned that there's sort of regular reviews of regulation. That's part of the government process, and so feedback is always welcome. And appreciate you stating that when we chatted earlier. For those of you who are curious, Solar Alberta is requesting that the microgeneration regulation be amended so that folks who have a 200 amp residential service could produce self-supply and export in an unlimited way. That is something we're asking for. It's not something the government has committed to yet, but if you're curious about that, you can go to the Advocate with Us section of our website and join us in kind of just raising some awareness about some of the issues that we are hearing about from you folks regularly. So thank you for raising the question here today. Okay, getting a lot of microgen questions, but that's no surprise to you too. I think we knew that was going to happen today as well, since there are only a few people yet using the small scale generation regulation. Is the Government of Alberta looking to restrict solar club electricity rate adjustments throughout the year? I think what they mean is solar specific pricing. Just to be clear with everyone, that's actually not just the solar club. There are multiple solar specific pricing plans in Alberta. That's just one of them. And so a question about whether solar specific pricing is kind of coming under threat in the future.
So I think my first comment is no, we're not actively modifying the microgeneration regulation, which is where that is housed at this time, partly because we're undergoing a large review of the electricity system from a wholesale market and transmission space, as well as our agencies are undergoing reviews. You may be aware that Utilities Commission is reviewing, as you have a petition, really reviewing renewables and land use issues. So there are some very large policy and legislative reviews happening today. So we're just not actively reviewing it. We are very aware of this economic, sort of attribute of microgeneration with solar. And we're always interested in looking at our policies and programs on an ongoing basis to ensure they meet the objectives, one which is really fair cost allocation to Albertans. So we are aware, and of course, if there are large incentives to some customers, you have to look at where the cost may be on other customers. So that's really our policy intent, but we're not actively reviewing this at this time. But we do want to look at microgeneration in the near future because you and other organizations have raised some really interesting areas that we want to explore further, including self-supply with export and cost allocation. It will certainly be part of any review we do, but we have not officially launched a review yet.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that. And it's a really interesting discussion. I often hear about fairness and comparison in relation to sort of the other consumers who don't have solar. But sometimes our members think about fairness in comparison to power plants who actually can opt in at different prices at any time and aren't restricted to just 2 seasonal prices. And so it is interesting when we think about fairness, how it kind of depends. Are you comparing yourself to another generator, or are you comparing yourself to another consumer? And depending on your lens on that, it can lead you to a completely different assessment of fairness, can't it? So I don't envy you two and your jobs, but I appreciate you sharing with us where you're at. I did hear that the Minister of Utilities was looking at some announcements in March, I think. So I suspect that probably relates a bit to all the work you folks have been undertaking of late. So we are kind of watching as well for what that might have in store. Andy, storage. Again, we're on storage, which obviously is very popular right now to think about. It's an important topic. But can you please talk briefly about battery integration? I think you did touch on that, but if you have anything else you'd like to add about the battery component, I think our audience is definitely curious about that topic.
I mean, happy to talk about storage in general, and then maybe Betsy can comment if she has anything specific to small scale or microgen. I would say just at large, the government has for years recognized the importance of energy storage and the unique attributes it brings to the electricity system. And this is happening around the world, particularly as renewables are growing. We're seeing a greater need for energy storage. So we do have a bill that has received royal assent called the Electricity Statutes Amendment Act. And we are hoping that this government can move to final proclamation. And that bill includes a definition of energy storage to really allow for greater clarity and opportunity for energy storage, whether that's through generation, through any of the generation scales, to, you know, being a non-wire service for distribution or transmission wires as well. So broadly speaking, we are looking to the opportunities energy storage can bring, and our agencies are definitely collaborating with us on that. In terms of small scale, we did sort of raise the fact that small scale generation may not be the best door for you to walk through if you are deploying energy storage. You may look to distribution connected generation. Utility scale storage is definitely something that is growing. And there's opportunities on the microgeneration side as well. And those would really be specific to your household and what you want to do as an energy participant.
Okay, so lots to watch out for there in the future. Kelly, how do you justify and quantify the electricity use for an electric vehicle? Do you have to wait until you have consumption data for a year? I happen to have been asking about this myself through the distributors this year, so I can tell you that you do have to have a bill of sale or you have to literally have the vehicle. And then I think they have some standard rates that apply. But I don't think you have to have consumption data for a year. Anything you wanted to add on that though, Betsy or Nicole?
No, but also just clarifying that I think she's probably thinking about microgeneration and the sizing limits, but
Mm.
self-supplying on your home to charge your electric vehicle, as opposed to the small scale generation today that we're talking about today, which is basically a power plant.
Thank you for that clarification. And I will say as well to anyone who is curious about system sizing for microgeneration with respect to heat pumps and, well, HVAC systems, I like to call them, because mine provides AC as well. Anyways, we actually have a blog post about that and how the different distributors are requiring sizing for that. Just so you folks are aware, there is a lot of flexibility in the microgeneration regulation. So the distributors actually have a lot of these decisions made more at the local level. And that's why we surveyed the distributors to ask about what they're doing with heat pumps, because it's a little different than electric vehicles for microgeneration regulation. You do typically with a heat pump have to have a year's worth of consumption data, or it has to be standalone with no natural gas auxiliary for that to be included. But anyways, if you want to nerd out on that stuff, check out our blog. It's on our homepage. We always like to chat with the distributors. And we'll see if we have a few more small scale questions here before we wrap up. Paul's wondering, are there any plans to bring small scale generation regulation under Rule 24? And I will ask you to also say what Rule 24 is if you could, because I think a lot of folks here don't necessarily know. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rule 24 is a rule under the Alberta Utilities Commission that regulates power plant approvals in general and also regulates some portions of microgeneration. My I don't want to speak on behalf of the AUC, but my understanding is no. Rule 24 is focused on microgeneration, which is power production for your own use, and distinguishing that from the small scale, which is a power plant for sale to the grid. So different purposes. So my understanding is no. When the small scale regulation was enacted in 2019, the Alberta Utilities Commission did have a public engagement regarding potential rule development. And I think where they sort of collectively landed based on the feedback was that there's enough existing processes already that, we don't need another rule if we don't really need it. I think they did do some work with the distributors to have things like standardized application forms similar to microgeneration, but there is currently no rule in place, and to my knowledge, no plans to expand Rule 24 to small scale generation.
Okay, thank you for that. Quick question here. Where can we find regulations and procedures for both the microgen and small scale generation regs? I just Google them personally and they pop right up on my screen, but that might be because of my biased Google history. I don't know. Is there a place where you two would recommend folks go?
Yeah, the Alberta Utilities Commission has great information on its website about microgeneration and small scale generation. Your local distribution facility owner, most of them have very established information on their websites as well. And if anybody kind of has questions and is looking to contact the department, there was an email address that flashed up very quickly on Nicole's last slide. I'll just repeat that for you. It is electricity@gov.ab.ca, where anybody who's interested can contact the department if you have questions as well.
Great, I appreciate that. And there is a question here about community groups. Are there a number of community groups that have expressed interest in entering into a community benefits agreement or statement? Sounds like this might be coming from a prospective developer who's looking for a partnership. So, do you know anyone who's kind of chomping at the bit, wanting to get going and looking for some partners?
I think Solar Alberta is a great conduit for that. I get
Mm-hmm.
a lot of calls about people who are interested in building solar, but this is not their primary business, and they are looking for a partner to help them out. And so I actually commonly refer people to um, the I'm sorry, I don't know the correct name, the developer listing, I guess,
The director.
on Solar Alberta's website.
Yeah, we do have a list of developers there. If you're looking for community groups, we also have a couple of cooperatives who are in our membership. You can find them in the cooperative and nonprofit sector of our directory. We also have a request for quotes system on our website. And I've actually started telling people, look, if you want to make a deal with someone, like use that system, because even if it's a farmer who's looking to lease out some of their brownfield, or if it's a community group looking to find a developer, like why not communicate through our request for quotes system with all of our members? That's definitely a tool that's out there. It was initially put in, just to get quotes on small rooftop installations, but I feel like it could be useful for many different partnerships and relationships. So feel free to have at her if you're interested. Yeah, thanks for that, Betsy. Okay, a question about the moratorium. I love it. We are getting close to the end. That's a beefy question, but with the Alberta government moratorium on renewable power plants, what's the risk profile as electrical demands increase? So, is the moratorium contributing, I guess, to the destabilization of the grid? Is how I understand that question, but perhaps you understand it differently. Can you cover that in 2 minutes or less? That's a big one.
Uh, So definitely the pause on renewables was put in place, recognizing both land use issues arising and the need to review those, as well as reliability issues coming from greater penetration of renewables on the system. So it really was meant to be a pause and to give agencies and government time to really think about how to better integrate renewables into the system and to ensure that land use impacts were recognized and appropriately managed. So there are two facets of the AUC inquiry, Module A and Module B, both to be wrapping up by the end of next month. With the pause coming off the end of this month, which we're all very excited about. So it has led to, a bit of an opportunity to take a breath, take a step back. The AUC has still been reviewing applications throughout this time period. They just haven't been able to issue that final approval. So we're in a lot of conversation with the AUC in terms of how many projects are in that queue and are they ready, etc. So we do understand the investment impact that this has had on the community and an investment community at large. But we do fully intend to end the pause and come out with that clarity that the investment community needs, that municipalities need, that everyone needs to understand how we're going to integrate renewables and ensure we have reliable and affordable electricity. So you did mention a sort of a March date that we think has been communicated quite a bit, in addition to hopefully some statements coming out before the pause is lifted. So we're very optimistic that this broad systemic review will lead to some really good policy changes over the coming months and year, and will provide some more clarity to the community.
Yeah, so we were certainly glad that they continued processing those applications. So hopefully we'll see a flurry of approvals in March. That's the dream. But anyways, that was at least a nice uh, adjustment when it originally came out. I think people got really nervous that we were going to also not be processing applications. So that was pretty terrifying for a lot of our members and followers. So we are at time, and you two have indulged us for more than an hour. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days and in the midst of this massive overhaul that you're in the throes of. You found time for us and all our questions. So thank you very much for that. As you were chatting, I thought, oh, next year we're going to have to do utility scale regs 101 because we've done micro and small now. So be prepared. I'm probably going to be coming back at you for more. This has been wonderful. So thank you two very much for your presentation and question and answer today. Thanks a lot to our engaged audience. Phenomenal questions. I think we really covered the gamut there. So that was great. And of course, to our sponsors, Solus and Enbridge, for making this all possible. Our free programming would absolutely not be possible without our wonderful presenters coming to us for free from your government, and also the amazing sponsors who are making it all possible. So thanks to everyone for being here today. We have one session left in the Solar Show, 4 o'clock. It's our networking event. You have until 3 o'clock to register for that. I hope to see you there. I think we already have over 180 people coming to network, so it should be a good one. Have a great day, everyone.